Welcome to Talking with Tech. My name is Chris Bugaj, and I'm here not with Rachel Madel. I'm here with my lovely wife, Melissa Bugaj. How's it going, Melissa?
It's good. How are you?
Good. So Rachel can't be with us today because she's off hiking in the Himalayas.
I know. We're watching her. Jealous.
I know. She sent us a few Marco Polos.
Yes.
And we saw her climbing around with monkeys.
Oh, my gosh. Amazing.
And just having an amazing experience. Mm-hmm. But missing her big time.
Missing her, yes. Did you hear that she climbed 1,000,000 steps?
No, I didn't see that.
Yes, to a Buddhist monk's
monastery?
Yes. And then at the top, she took pictures, and it's just breathtaking.
Well, I cannot wait to talk to her when she gets back and hear about all this. It sounds very spiritual.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
But we're here today.
Yes.
In the closet.
Of course.
Talking to everybody.
Yep.
And we actually have kind of a fun story to share that's related to AAC.
Right.
As people might know, you work at a high school. You're the special ed dean at a local high school.
Yep.
Since you've worked at that high school for a number of years, I've joked about, hey, how about I invite you to homecoming, or you can invite me to, like, we'll be homecoming dates.
Yeah.
And so
I had to think about it.
Yeah, so this year I asked you. You thought about it. You got no better offers. And I came to homecoming with you this year.
Yes.
And so we get all dialed up, right? We get all gussied up, and we go to homecoming. And you chaperone. And this particular year, I sat at the table as people came in.
The check-in, yeah.
The check-in. And I was sitting next to an earth science teacher, a general ed earth science teacher. She has students that she works with that have disabilities, but she's not a special ed teacher. Fair?
No, fair. However, we started a class this year for our students with intellectual disabilities, and they go in and they are exposed to a classroom about mapping and the world and oceans, and it's wonderful. And I will say that this general ed teacher was the first person to jump on board and say, yes, I want to do this with these kids.
Yes. So I'm sitting next to her, and we're having a conversation about, when there's a lull, and we're having a conversation about what that class is like and how she's doing and what kind of activities and lessons she's planning, right? What kind of experiences she's designing for them. And one of the students that's in there uses an augmentative communication device.
Correct. I've been on here talking about him before.
Yes. And we've had Margaret, our daughter, has talked about how she has spent time with this student and watched Avengers Endgame together, or maybe it's Infinity War, whatever. They watched one of the Avengers movies together, and that they just talked to each other on the communication devices they were watching this movie. Yeah. So I'm talking to this teacher, and she mentions how she said, oh, Chris, you're going to love this. The student, we have him finding all sorts of words like ocean and mountain and all sorts of, like words that you would expect to experience, vocabulary words, content words that you'd expect to experience in an earth science class.
Correct.
And it's great. It's great. And I sat there smiling like, yes, this is awesome, right? But listeners of this podcast will know that those words are not necessarily core vocabulary words. Those are the fringe vocabulary words. You know that, right? Because you live with me.
Yes.
And this is what we talk about all the time. As I'm championing this effort that she's doing, I'm also thinking, how can I help her understand this concept of descriptive teaching? And so I mentioned it to her, and I just say, so this is awesome that you're finding these words and that you're using the device and that you're modeling on the device and you're using it. Fantastic. Now, can I just tweak it a little bit? And she's like, please tell me, because she's that type of teacher, right? And I said, so let me just explain. When a kid leaves you and leaves that class, how often is he going to say the word ocean or mountain? Or it's great that he's found those, but those are you use those words very infrequently.
Right.
But what words would we use to describe the ocean and the mountain? And she said stuff like
wet, big, blue, and the mountain is tall.
Yeah, cold.
Cold.
Animals live there.
Yes.
And so her and I, right there in that moment, started describing these sort of content vocabulary words.
And in fact, you pulled out a piece of paper at homecoming, sat at the table, and geeked out together while I was left alone to dance by myself.
Yes, I'm sorry.
It's okay. It was very fun to watch.
It was fun to watch you dance, too, like Napoleon Dynamite out there.
Yes. Staying alive.
So The whole time I was nervous, though, talking to her, because I didn't want to be that, like, you know. That guy that's like, you're doing it great, but can I tweak it and move her on to the next step without squashing what she's already doing?
Right.
And luckily, this teacher did not take it that way. No. She was very open to it.
She saw it as an and, not a but.
Yes.
So you're doing great, and here's how we can move it forward.
Yes, here's the next little tweak, right? You went from not using communication device to using communication device to now using it even more effectively.
Yes.
Which is just growth, and so awesome that she was open to it. But we left homecoming, right?
Yes.
After cleaning up, came home that night. The in-laws were in town. We hung out with them. And then a few days later, I get a text message from you.
Yes. So I was walking around. I typically walk around during those times to just go check in and see what they're up to and talk to the kids in those classes. And when I went into the class, I saw that she was sitting at a table with the student with the augmentative communication device. And so I went over just to see what was going on, because I knew that she was working on mountain and ocean and everything. And he was very engaged in everything she was saying. And he was also finding things on his device, but I couldn't hear until I got over there. And when I got over there, it was her asking questions on the device. She had borrowed the assistant's device that the assistant has in order to ask him questions. So when they were talking at that point about the ocean, because they were designing an ocean floor, and then they were going to put water in it. So,
like an actual real, like, I mean, it's not the real
model.
Ocean, but a model of it.
Yes. So she was talking about sand, and they were saying that, the grains of sand were small. And then she was talking about the ocean, and he communicated the word wet, the word blue. He communicated the word big. He is very, very excited about this class and all of the hands-on that's involved in it. In fact, he did walk by her classroom, and when he got to her classroom, he stopped and said, "Oceans, oceans, oceans, there, because he wanted to go in." So it made her, she left what she was doing to come out during our planning, run down and say, "Guess what just happened?" So then, to go even further, she works with a special educator in that room that is very much being educated with LAMP and very interested in all the features of it.
Yeah, and this particular student uses LAMP Words for Life.
Yes, and so you taught the special ed teacher.
Well, so this particular special ed teacher that supports this classroom had, I did a training with him last year, just a little bit, and then he came to one of our training sessions that we have going on right now, and so he kind of got reinforced in it. And he actually went out and bought the app himself to have on his own iPad, because he knew that he'd be supporting not just this student, but maybe future students as well. But
what is that feature in LAMP Words for Life that she utilized to make that?
Oh, so what you're referencing is, okay, so the special ed teacher had worked with the earth science teacher to make cards, and that she put on a ring, right? And that feature is not actually part of LAMP Words for Life. There's another software called the New Voice software, which is free. You can get it, and it allows you to print the icon sequences. So the way LAMP Words for Life works is that you hit one button plus another button equals saying something out loud.
Right. So we would hit please, and then you go into please, and it opens up almost a whole world of hello, goodbye, thank you.
Right,
and so you can
page.
Choose. Right.
So to say a word, it's a sequence, and that's what she and this special ed teacher had made, are cards that had those sequences on them so that the teaching assistants could more quickly model the words.
Yes.
And that the student, when looking for an individual word, could see the path.
They had the resource. Now, not only that, which is so awesome, but she came in to the room to show us, and it wasn't just words like mountain, how to find a mountain. It wasn't words like wet, how to find wet. It was words vocabulary words of how can we describe converge?
Which is come together.
Yes. So she found the words come together, and she printed out those ways to model that. So now that student has that visual resource when he gets stuck on how to say it, and everybody around him has that visual resource.
Like a little cheat sheet.
Yes.
About, okay, she had brainstormed, she had descriptively taught the content words, not just the ones we had talked about before, like mountain and ocean, but like you said, divergent, converge,
yes,
and the list goes on. And she made this little cheat sheet for the student and everyone supporting the student.
Not only that, but she also had a general education student. Actually, she was carrying those words around, and she is teaching these. She's also an earth science teacher. And so she was teaching this in earth science in her research class. And when she was carrying them around, she was trying to describe converge to this child. And he was like, I just don't get it. And she said, so I just pulled out the ring. And he was like, oh, well, now it makes sense. So one thing, and it can work for everyone, right?
Yes, exactly. So let me just make sure I understand. The strategy that she used for a student with a disability that uses an augmentative communication device, she then ended up using that exact same strategy to help a student that didn't have a disability, or even if they did, it wasn't one that has in relation to communication.
Correct.
Just to teach the vocabulary.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. That visual just made that difference.
Yes.
Isn't that amazing?
Yes.
I work in a pretty awesome place.
Yeah, that is pretty cool. And occasionally I get to go to your school.
Yeah.
And the one day that I was there doing some flexible learning spaces stuff, and I got to see their science teacher.
Yes.
And you sent me the picture of how she was doing the descriptive teaching on the communication device. So when I got to see her again after having gone, to homecoming, and she brought out that ring and she was showing me those cards that she made and how excited she was and how the progress that she could see, the growth just in this short time.
Yeah.
And one last thing about this whole story, I think, is to kind of illustrate the fact that when an adult or a peer models on the device and actually uses the device, that story that you said about the student coming to the door and saying, ocean's there, wanting to go in there, he knows now, he is associated, well, this is someone who's going to use my language.
Yes.
Right? And I think students end up finding that, right? They recognize that, okay, in all the people that I interact with, there are people who will talk to me using my language.
Correct.
And there are people who won't or don't yet.
Yeah.
When you're with somebody who uses the communication device, then the student uses the communication device. And when they're with somebody who does not use the communication device, the student also then tends to not use the communication device,
right.
Or use it less.
Or use it very surface. Okay. So, for example, I can just say that the growth I've seen in this student because of this and because of this class and because we're expanding, well, he's expanding his world on people and relationships. It's no different, right? It's no different than making a relationship with a student is a parent. But he has the greatest sense of humor. So very, very funny, makes his point. And if I told a bad joke to him one day and he just politely said, stop, and then went back and said, please. It's really helping development. It's really helping build those relationships. And like you said, it's no different than any other relationship you build. If you speak that student's language, if you know what really gets that kid to connect with you, you're going to do it. And again, not only with an augmentative communication device, but with every kid. So once again, working with one thing can really encapsulate everyone.
Yes, really. A strategy that starts with someone with a disability eventually blossoms out to be used by everybody.
Yes.
You see that time and time again over the last 20 years or more in special education. All right, so I apologize that I have infected you with bad jokes.
Oh.
Hashtag dad jokes. But let me transition over to telling everybody about the interview today.
Okay, well, hey, thanks for having me on.
Thanks for coming on.
I love talking about my students and students in general, and this has just been really fun to be with you.
Thanks, yeah, anytime. Come on into the closet.
Yes, and so here's the thing, though. When you're done, could you start wrapping these Christmas presents? That would be great.
Which one's mine?
Nope.
So about the interview today, today's interview is with Catherine Fredricks. Catherine and I met years ago at ATIA and have stayed in touch ever since. She works up in New Jersey. I got to go to New Jersey and do a presentation and see her in face-to-face, but that's not where this was recorded. We got on our traditional Zoom and we recorded. She talks all about her experience with AAC, specifically in the school that she works with. She provides lots of different strategies, and I think you're really going to enjoy this interview with Catherine Fredricks from New Jersey. Welcome to Talking with Tech. My name is Chris Bugaj, and I'm here with Catherine Fredricks. How's it going, Catherine?
It's going very well, Chris.
So thank you so much. So just a little behind the scenes here, everybody. Catherine and I have tried to record twice now. This is our second time. And the first time I had technical issues where I could not get the computer to record. I fought with a Chromebook. I fought with all sorts of ways, and we ended up having to reschedule. And then we rescheduled, and I was still fighting with the Chromebook, or still fighting with, I was still fighting with the technology, but we persevered, and we're here now. Thank you, Catherine, for joining me.
No, my pleasure, Chris.
So, Catherine, let's tell people, who are you, what do you do, and where do you work?
Okay, so I am a speech-language pathologist. My subspecialty, if you will, is AAC, because I have done it for as long as I can remember, which is too long to mention. I work currently, I've worked all around our district. I'm in Wayne, New Jersey. I'm employed in a public school system, which I think gives me some advantages that I can talk about later.
Sure.
Currently, I'm in an elementary school, so I have K through 5. And my students on my caseload are primarily the self-contained LLD classrooms. And about half of my sessions, because I counted them today, involve students using AAC.
So LLD is language learning delay or language
learning disabilities.
Disability.
Yes. And the students within those classes have a wide variety of disabilities and a wide variety of abilities. There is a curriculum that they follow. We use each student's AAC to access the academic curriculum as well as develop speech and language skills. I also happen to be in a school with the most amazing principal. He has a vision of inclusion. And our school doesn't just talk about inclusion. We are an inclusion school. All of our students in our self-contained classes are included with all of the gen ed students for a wide variety of typical activities, school shows, gyms, specials, science, social studies, depending on the abilities, anything that the children are doing outside. So it's not just that, they get some inclusion time sometime. It's on a daily basis.
And it sounds like a philosophy of as much as possible.
It is the vision of our principal, and it so coincides so very well with my vision. So I'm really very, very lucky to be in the situation that I'm in right now.
So you said, did you say over half of your students are using some form of AAC?
It's not half of the students on my caseload. It's half of my therapy time is with students using AAC.
Gotcha.
My students with AAC receive more intensive services, if I could put it that way, than a student, say, with articulation issues or with language issues that are not quite as needy or as severe. It's on a case-by-case basis. But when I counted up all of my therapy sessions each week, half of them are with students with AAC. And that doesn't include, I have about an hour and a half a week for AAC time dedicated to AAC for programming, for training, for staffing, for pushing in, for answering questions, and all of that sort of thing. I'm very, very blessed to be in the program that I am in with a principal who understands how important it is, and with a special services department that also understands how important it is.
So because the students already have AAC, let's talk a little bit about that process. What does it look like in your neck of the woods for how a student acquires AAC and what that selection process, specifically that selection process, looks like for you?
It varies. Some of the students come to me with AAC that they've been given either through an outside evaluation or a speech and language specialist in our district who felt that the child needed AAC, or they come from another district and don't have any AAC. So students start here at Pines at the age of 5, so it's kindergarten. So the room that I am in most often is kindergarten, first grade. When the students come in, oftentimes they're not using their AAC and nobody can figure out why.
I might have an idea. Could it be that no one has taught them how to use their AAC?
And there you go. And the other idea that I know you will agree with is I look at their AAC systems and I say, wow, this is really limiting. They have a choice of 20 things. Isn't that wonderful? And I look at it and then I create waves on my end by saying, can I please have a different system?
Mm-hmm.
Can I please have a system that provides a robust language, that I can model language using that system, because I can't model language using the system that they have. And my experience, this is my 3rd year here. My experience so far has been sometimes the parents don't agree with me. Sometimes the staff doesn't agree with me. Sometimes that happens, and then we have a discussion. And I say, please just let me try.
Mm-hmm.
Let me try. Give me 3 months. Let me try. And so far, each and every time, it's been okay. They've seen the value of it, and the children are making a lot of progress. In terms of choosing which AAC, most of the SLPs in our district are very familiar with Prolo-Quo. The way I understand the system right now, we have an assistive technology team, but with only a part-time SLP on it, so they don't really have a lot of time to do AAC evaluations. If the SLP says, I have a child who needs this, can you please give me an iPad with Prolo-Quo so I can try it out? My understanding, don't hold me to it, but my understanding right now is that is what the AT team is able to do for them, for that.
Okay.
So for me, sometimes Prolo-Quo is not the end-all be-all. It's easier for me to model language using LAMP Words for Life.
Okay.
We don't have a lot of students with severe physical disabilities, so I'm not talking about an accent and things like that.
Mm-hmm. Most of your kids are using direct select with their finger.
Pretty much,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. Yeah, that's a good, I mean, some might do, select on release, but for the most part, it is still using their finger.
Okay.
So my biggest issue that I try to encourage people to do is to look beyond 20 selections, to look beyond, no, the children don't have to prove to you what they know before you give them another word, because that's not how typically children develop.
Mm-hmm.
You learn language. I do get pushback on LAMP Words for Life because, gee, it's not as pretty as Prolo-Quo. And, it's harder to understand than Prolo-Quo. And the reality is, for the students, it's easier to understand because they don't read and they don't categorize and they don't identify pictures and symbols yet.
Uh-huh. And they don't have language. They don't
have the language.
Right.
So I've been using AAC, either pro quo or LAMP Words for Life, with students who are selectively mute, students who are bilingual, English is not their first language, maybe they came here 2 years ago, for students with autism, both with and without verbal speech, just to develop language patterns and language abilities, and also severely apraxic students and students with a syndrome that has nothing to do with autism. Each and every one of the students that I'm working with is making great progress because of the aided language approach.
So, Catherine, let me ask you, can I dive in here a little bit, specifically to that 3-month window that you were able to convince people to give you? You say, okay, it's not, give me 3 months to try. It sounds like there's 2 big endeavors there. One is, the student, right? There's the helping the student make some progress with their language goals in 3 months. And 3 months is not a huge lot of time when you're talking about language, you know?
It isn't.
So there's one, but then the second thing is convincing the team members that, oh yeah, we should be trying something more than 20 words, and we should be using aided language stimulation. So can you help? I bet you there's a lot of people out there listening that might be in the same boat. Like, just listen to me, let me convince you, okay, I got these 3 months. What are some strategies? What do you do to, one, bring the student along as quickly as possible, but then 2, convince the entire team surrounding them that this was the right strategy, that the 3 months was successful?
One of the first things that I encourage, and I get a lot of pushback on this, people like to hide. Like, say if you're talking on pro quo, even if you're talking about LAMP Words for Life, I start with a full version because that's easiest for me to model language. But let's go back to pro quo. They hide everything. And what I do rather than hide is what I call pop a button. I'll make it a totally different bright color so it pops at you, so it looks different. But I do not hide everything else. So there was one particular student I had, and this was a big conversation with his family. They wanted those 20 things. He was barely using those. We need to, and that was my 3-month student. And I introduced him to Pro Quo 60 because he was using 20 things on that particular program. I wasn't about to change the program. And the only really happy time that he liked to do was run. That was his happiness. So we went to the cafeteria and I just did go, and we ran and we stopped. And we did go, and we did stop, and we did go, and we did stop. And after the 4th time, he did go. He pushed it. He touched it. And then I pushed stop, and he's pushing go, and he's running. So that's where we started.
And you said you made that is an interesting approach where you made the button pop, like you put an outline around it, or you changed the background color? I changed
the background color, and I make it a bright something. You know, bright green, bright pink, bright yellow, brightest of the bright. And it is not confusing to children. It's so much easier for them to find. I don't have to limit anything. So I find that people prefer to hide instead of work around it, kind of think out of the box a little bit.
Yeah, no, we have been doing some training in our neck of the woods, and that keeps coming up in each of the training but it looks like it's too overwhelming. Well, I know it might look too overwhelming to you, but chances are it's not to the student. It's not too visually overwhelming. And you're going to find that if you're really doing, most of our training has been centered around partner augmented input or aided language stimulation, teaching the adults and the peers and the family members to use the communication device. And as soon as they start playing with it, they're like, oh yeah, how do I say open? That's not here. Right. If it's not on there, then you can't say open. So
one of my favorite things is, now, by the way, that student that I did with Go and the 60 items, and I popped the button with the background color, he did not read. He did not match objects to pictures. He did not know a symbol. He could not identify things. If you said, show me cup, nope, none of those things. but he learned go and open, and the things I was doing were things in which he was very interested, and it meant, and he did quite well. He did quite well with that.
So making the buttons pop is one great strategy, and I really love that. What about convincing the rest of the team members? So your 3 months is closing to an end. How do they come to go, yeah, okay, we're going to do this? I mean, because they see the proof in the pudding? Do you show them numbers?
They see the proof. And then I have to make it my business to make sure that there's some proof. But it hasn't happened yet that nothing's happened.
Right.
Something has always happened positively, because I break it down to the very simplest of the simple. Go.
Right.
That's it. He wasn't using it to communicate at all. And then we would go to speech, we go to run, we go outside, we go. And then I trained his paraprofessional, just show him go all the time, model go. Every place you go, you are going to say go, go, go. By the time, after a year with us, he was saying the word go. This was a nonverbal child.
Exactly.
He was talking.
So the device was the catalyst for him to say it verbally.
It was. It absolutely was.
I have definitely had that experience as well, where there have been students that eventually have said, okay, thank you very much. Here you go. You can have this back now.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, he wasn't quite there, but the fact that he was talking at all at 6 years old, starting, was huge. And his family saw it. So that was awesome. One of my issues, though, and I don't know if anybody else has this, I don't know if you have this, I am only one of 17 SLPs in the district. Not everybody is as versed in AAC as, say, I am with my background. But they try. They have the verbiage. They've learned what core vocabulary is, because I've talked about it for years. They know aided language, whether or not they do it quite effectively or not. They're trying. They know that. All right. And then it comes time to write goals for an IEP. And then I see things like, student will use their AAC device to request, comment, ask questions, and describe. Period. Done. Is our AAC goal. So one of my hopes is that the district will look at the possibility of getting a group together of SLPs and districts to create appropriate, measurable AAC goals from which people can choose. Because not everybody is an AAC expert. They know what to start with, but they don't know where to go from there. And these things are not measurable. So that's my hope. That's what I'm pitching to the district right now.
So we've had these conversations in the past. I mean, I've been participating in conversations in the past, and I know that term is like a goal bank, right? Here's a bank of goals that you could draw from and it doesn't mean you have to pick from those exclusively. It's just the idea that you could. It's a jump start, right? I mean that. Okay. Oh, this is sort of similar. I mean, if
it gives them an idea, because for myself, I write in all my own goals because there's nothing appropriate in our system. We use a real-time system, and in real time, that's the goal. That's in there for AAC.
Well, and language development does have a progression that you go through. So you don't necessarily have to pull goals out of the thin air. Like, I don't know what my goals should be. Well, there's language development milestones that you could be using as 10 poles or 10 poles? No, mile markers, if you will. Yeah.
But somehow there's a disconnect that I find between using AAC, making it a separate goal, and language goals. So even though they're doing language goals, they're not equating them. I don't know if that makes sense. They're not equating them as using it on their AAC device. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and to me,
the child will name 5 colors. If I were writing it, I would say, child will name verbally or using their AAC device 5 colors.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, either or, whatever becomes easiest for the child, however we can do it, that's fine.
Right. Well, and so I guess one way you could break that down is let's say the goal was to name 5 colors. You could put as the accommodation access to an AAC system, or maybe more specifically than that if you needed to. But the modality of how they're going to do that, and it could be written in the goal, I suppose. I sometimes I wonder about that because we don't write that for articulation goals, right? Like using or do we?
No, so that's given that it's a speech goal. So that's why I specify verbally or using AAC.
Yeah.
Verbally or using their device, whatever device that is, whatever program that is, whatever. Because up until now, I've been getting goals with students that say, we'll name this, we'll say this, we'll tell this, and the implication is it's all verbal.
It's verbal. Oh, I see.
And then at the bottom, child will use AAC to participate in their educational curriculum. Okay.
Gotcha.
How?
Well, maybe could it be written like using any modality, a student will name 5 colors,
Yes, that would be another way to do it. Absolutely.
But you can't name 5 colors without some sort of AAC system. Otherwise,
Exactly.
I guess you could do it verbally.
Have to have, but see, don't forget, many of my students do have some verbal ability.
Mm-hmm.
So they have limited verbal ability.
So this is why it has to be
They might
any.
I can think of 2 in particular, severely apraxic. So they will give you some kind of an approximation, but if you turned around and you had no context, you wouldn't be exactly sure what they were saying.
Gotcha.
And for them, the AAC is very, very important. But it also has to be modeled, and I would tell you that is something that I am constantly pushing into the classroom, constantly pushing in works, because then it's not just the student does it with me, but now the student is in the classroom. So I basically ask the teacher, what do you need them to do? What are the other students doing to participate? And then I just make it happen for that child using AAC.
Awesome. Do you find when you're in this sort of integrated therapy model where you are pushing in to the classroom, do you find yourself in a new role as far as like coaching teaching assistants or coaching pairs or pairs?
Again,
peers?
Wonderful principal. He gives me time. He allows me and provides substitutes for me to do initial trainings for teachers and for paraprofessionals, particularly the one-on-one and the classroom paras.
Oh, so what does that look like? So tell me more about that.
Well, depending on how much time I have, it usually gets scrunched into an hour.
Uh-huh.
A lot of that is theory.
I know that hour training. I've given it many times.
This is aided language.
Yeah.
This is what a motor plan looks like.
Mm-hmm.
This is why a motor plan is important.
Mm-hmm.
This is why we do what we do. And then how do I say it? Like specify it to their children, to the students in their class. This is why your student is using this. This is how it's meant to be used. This is where we want to go next. This is what we're looking for. One of the students that came, this is his 3rd year with me here. When he came 3 years ago, he was 5 and he would throw his device with Lamp Words for Life. He is now in 2nd grade. He is now using his device to create his, what do they call it, journal in the morning. And I say, let's write it. And he writes it, we email it, he prints it out, and he pastes it into his journal because his writing is really, really difficult for him. So email has really been wonderful for us. And he has blown everyone away. Oh, when he came, he didn't talk at all. He is now talking in sentences that people understand. So we're using his device now for grammar, syntax, tenses, all of those things that nobody thought he would do. He's still 6, by the way. He didn't turn 7 yet. And he has been very successful. So I think people have been seeing successes, and that encourages them to do other things. Like, you need one really great teacher who will let you go in and do stuff. And then once it happens and everyone gets amazed, it snowballs.
Yes. It's like finding your champion, right? This champion to do it.
And I have the most amazing teacher who looked at me and she said, okay, if you say so. And she allowed it to happen. And now she says, I cannot believe I would have never, ever thought that was possible. This little guy, by the way, his parents allow me to video him. And I use videos of him when I do presentations, like the one we were at in New Jersey.
Uh-huh.
So I had actual videos of when we started with him and what he's doing now. And now when he emails the assistant director of student support services, the school secretary, the janitor, the bus driver, all of his family. And before he emails them, he says their names perfectly clearly. It's awesome.
That's so great.
All the research that's out there, he's living proof.
He's the proof of it. Yes, that's awesome. Well, it's something else you said there that I know we like to harp on a lot on this podcast, and I know I like to talk about it a lot, is you use the phrase, I never would have thought he was capable. But now that she's seen it, I wonder if she will ever feel that way about another student ever again. Like, look at a student and go, oh, well, that kid was an outlier. This kid will never. Or does it completely change the outlook of now, like, oh, well, if it was possible for that kid, then it should be possible for every kid,
That's what I think people have the most trouble with, Chris, is they look at what a student cannot do right now. Instead of looking at a student and anticipating potential. And I don't know if that's something that you can actually teach. I mean, when I look at a student, I look at what I get them at 5. I'm thinking of what do I think they're capable of at 21 when they leave me, when they leave our system. What would I like them to be able to do? What do the parents want them to do? And I used to have high schoolers on my caseload a few years ago. I would ask that at an IEP meeting. The child's going to be graduating in 2 years. What would you like them to do? Every last parent would say, I want them to be able to talk to me. I want them to be able to tell me what's wrong, what they want, what they're thinking. And again, isn't that the purpose of AAC?
Exactly.
Tell us what they're thinking and not necessarily what we want them to say.
Yes.
So.
Yeah. Well, I think another aspect that happens there is that so often like you said, you work in a kindergarten through 5th grade, K-5 school. So they don't see that longevity. You, having worked in a high school, you can see that, and you can see kind of that longer approach. Same thing with the kids that are coming in from preschool. The preschool teachers might never see them again, and so there you lose this whole longer term approach. Yeah, continuity.
You lose the continuity, and that is one of my concerns with people who prefer one program over another. People seem to be program happy. I can add this, I can do that, I can change this, I can do that. Okay, so now we're in preschool. Preschool SLP adds something. They now go to kindergarten. that teacher needs things differently. So now we're adding things in different places.
Mm-hmm.
Student doesn't know where the other stuff was because they forgot it over the summer. Nobody's continuing, and now everything's in a new spot. Okay, now we go to the next grade. Well, they add new things. By the time you get to high school, the student's throwing the device because they don't know where anything is. There was no consistent motor plan. So my preference for myself to model language, if we're going to use an app on an iPad, is the LAMP Words for Life.
Mm-hmm.
Because you don't need to add anything.
And if you do, you can. If
you can, and I do for certain things.
Yeah, the dogs, the family dog's name is a good example. I often find like that's a, one that you might want to add.
Well, I also have students from other countries, so they'll want favorite foods in their language, so I'll add, stuff like that.
Yeah.
But for the most part, it's not as many changes or additions. The other thing, which you might find interesting, is I usually ask a student, I had a student ask me today, she's pointing to a child and she's going, no, no. And I said, explain that to me. So, and she has pro or quo. So she went to the people page and she went to her classmate page and she's pointing to an empty spot and him. And I realized his name wasn't on it. I said, oh, are you asking me to put his name on your iPad? She goes, yes. And I said, okay, so where do you want it? And she shows me where she wants it. And I do that. I have a 24-year-old private person that I see also. I always ask her if she wants something, where do you want it? Because it's going to be her motor plan.
Yes.
It has to make sense to her, not to me, just because I happen to think it should go over here because it makes sense to me. That doesn't matter. So I do ask even my youngest students, if we are adding something, where do you think you would like it? Would you like it here? Would you like it here? And they're usually very good. And then they remember it more quickly.
That makes they have ownership over it then, as opposed to you just placing it somewhere. Yes.
It is theirs. It is theirs.
I love that. I love that. So let me ask you back to the selection process for a second. I know that since you said you have you tend to like LAMP Words for Life as because of how it's designed, and equating that to the selection process. Do you feel like there's some influence there, like that you tend to if you're in the middle of designing or working through a selection process with a student, and the family and the other teachers, how does that work with LAMP Words for Life?
Well, I prefer it because it's easier for me to model language. Mm-hmm. So,
because you know it, or because of the way it's designed? I know it
very, very well. Mm-hmm. And it's easier to use. There are only 3 hits tops. It always goes back. It's easier to search. Mm-hmm. It's easier to find things. There's a QWERTY key. There's everything needed for me. It's easier to do verb tenses, semantics. All of that is built in without me having to adjust and readjust. Mm-hmm. That being said, most of my students right now are using Prolo-Quo, and it works fine for them. So I have, over the years, in this school, my 2 recommendations have been either Prolo-Quo or LAMP Words for Life.
Uh-huh. Because it seems to work in most cases.
It works, and we are blessed to be in a district that provides iPads for students with no questions. We have a team that has a budget that provides that type of equipment and communication apps. Uh-huh. So up until this point, they've provided, I think we have Touch Chat HD for one particular student. We've had Prolo-Quo, obviously, and LAMP Words for Life. Those are the 3 pretty much now. That being said, we've also recommended an accent for one student at one point, depending on ability, an eye gaze system for another student because that was appropriate. So it does need to be appropriate.
Sure.
But When people are familiar with something, they're more likely to use it and model it. And
the hill is much less to climb when you're already familiar with. You've already climbed that hill. I'm looking back down. Look at how far I climbed this hill.
But I thought you might enjoy one other thing that we've done here. Again, love our principal. He asked me last year, because he knew that this was like my thing, and he was really enjoying the students coming to the office using their AAC devices to talk to him, because we just grab him and he's just so open to it. And he asked me, he said, Kath, can you do an AAC presentation to the 4th and 5th graders, the gen ed kids?
Yes.
So I did. To both of our 4ths and both of our 5ths last year. And the result of that was, the interest was amazing. The best aha moment for one of those students is when they raised their hand and said, Mrs. Fredricks, this is hard. And I said, yeah, it is. It's another language, isn't it? So then I asked them at lunchtime to find some of their colleagues, some of their peers in the lunchroom and sit down and have a chat with them on their AAC devices. And we call that now our Lunch Buddy program. And they're familiar with the students because they are also with them during gym and art and media and all the specials. So It's not like they don't know these kids. But now they're not scared of their devices.
Oh, that's so great. What an awesome strategy anyone could use, and especially, really any time. And it doesn't have to be AAC Awareness Month or May is Better English Speech Month.
And that was, our principal thought of that and asked me to do that. So I was like, oh yeah, why didn't I think of that? Like, can I really do that?
You could do it every year, really, right? It could be.
I haven't. It is going to be every year. It is going to be every year.
Awesome. Well, okay. So having been using AAC for many years now, what do you do? What's on your mind most recently? Kind of what's floating your boat? What's got you curious? What's keeping your learning going? Because I know, like I said, you had mentioned it. We had seen each other in New Jersey. I was recently there. We have seen each other at ATIA. So I've known you there for many years. And so I know you're constantly learning new stuff because I see you at conferences. I see you online on Twitter. So what's got you curious? What are you questing after recently?
What I'm curious about, or where I think we need to focus in New Jersey, is how to meld SLPs and AAC with behaviorists and ABA and discrete trials. And I think there's a collaboration that needs to occur and an openness on both sides that we can truly work together to accomplish what we need to accomplish for any particular student. That to me is an area that needs to grow a little bit. Needs to grow. Another thing is, I love going to conferences because sometimes there's no one supporting me in what I think I know. I'm busy supporting everybody else with what I think I know. So when I go to a conference or I go to ATIA and then somebody like yourself says the same thing that I do, it kind of validates me.
Yeah, it's reaffirming, right? Whew, I'm not on.
And I say, oh, okay. So, and then I go back and I'm re-energized. And, I do know what I'm talking about. I do know what I'm talking about.
I do find myself, tell me if you find this too, is like, sometimes I want to make sure that I'm peeking over the fence though, and being like, okay, what is everyone else saying? Because I don't want to just surround myself with people that agree, you know what I mean? Because then I've isolated myself and I'm not really looking at all the perspectives,
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So I guess this has always been my passion. It's not a job or an interest. It's a passion. I've always done AAC from PRC, and this okay, we won't go back that far. Right, for E-Trans, I've developed E-Trans, the original Dynavox. I worked with the original Dynavox user way back when. So it's a passion, and I love to share what I know. I think one of the confusions is people like things neat and in a box. And okay, so like PECS is really great because it has a progression. You go from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5, and that's easy to figure out, right? Yeah. And communication is messy. Communication on an AAC device and modeling is especially messy. Mm-hmm. So it's harder to put things in a box. And I guess one of the things that I'm trying to get administration to realize is that use of an AAC device is an ongoing process. It's not as simple as we set up 20 things and we're going to get them to use these 20 things. Well, what's the purpose of that? Where do you want that to go? And then there's the old Bloom's taxonomy, we've got to get past level 1. So sometimes I do feel like, I'm the odd man out. But now 3 years into Pines Lake, I have data to support what I'm talking about. I have students. The parents are overwhelmed. They could not believe. The student that came from Georgia that I had for 2 years, and I did give him pro lo quo, taught him how to program his own device. He did all his own programming. He did everything. And at 5th grade graduation, he was a speaker.
Oh my gosh.
As a speaker, and spoke in front of, I would say about 300 people.
Wow.
At the microphone. Because after I gave him the device, we realized he can read out loud what he writes. It was awesome.
That's amazing. That is so amazing. Well, it sounds like you're making big changes there, and that all the work that you've done over the years, and especially just this last 3 years, are really changing hearts and minds, and really having a huge benefit for students. So thank you.
Oh, don't thank me. Again, it's my passion. You want to hear a funny story though?
Yeah, tell me.
My little guy who uses lamp word spell, you know how we always talk about SNUG, spontaneous novel utterance generation?
Yeah.
He was in the principal's office the other day because he was name calling on his AAC device and going, baby, 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 and pointing to another student.
The AAC user got in trouble and got sent to the principal. That is great.
How typical is that? And he got talked to by the principal.
I love that. I mean, because it's like we don't use words like that. There's reasons.
Yeah,
oh my God.
Exactly. It was awesome. It was just great.
Oh, that's great. That's so great. I mean, I'm really sad and I'm disappointed in that student's choices.
Yeah, exactly. It was like, oh, that made me so sad today. Maybe you could do better, and we do. Yeah. We're a bucket filler school where somebody does something nice, they get a bucket filler. For everybody, we give them to random students when we see them doing something nice. The atmosphere in our school here is awesome.
Yeah, that sounds great.
And I tell our principal, it comes from the top. He leads it. Mm-hmm. He leads it, and that's why I can do what I do, because he leads it.
All right, well, last thing here, let me ask, how do people reach out to you if they want to find you on the internet or ask questions or learn more about you? What's the best way for them to connect with you?
Probably my school email. It's cfredericks@wayneschools.com. Schools is plural.com.
Okay. And you're on the Twitters. I've seen you there. I've seen you tweet.
I lurk. I'm more of a lurker. I'm also on the New Jersey CART board, the Coalition for the Advancement of Rehabilitation and Assistive Technology. It's NJ CART.
Okay.
So that's njcart.net. So you can connect that way.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much again for coming on, sharing those strategies are awesome. I think we're going to help a lot of people today, and we really appreciate it.
Wow, I appreciate everything you do. You give me strength to carry on, Chris, now that I know how to pronounce your name correctly. And I will see you at ATIA. I just got notification that my days off have been approved.
Fantastic. Then I'll see you down there.
Yep, you will.
All right, until next time, thanks so much, Catherine. We'll see you later.
All right, bye-bye, Chris.
Appreciate it. Bye-bye.
Hi, I'm Mei-Ling Chan.
And I'm Martin Sibley.
And we are the hosts of the Exceptional Leaders Podcast, where we spotlight high-profile topics and amazing people who are changing the worldview on disability.
Even though we are oceans apart, we are bringing people from all over the world together to discuss inclusion, advocacy, accessibility, and real-life journeys.
So listen to the Exceptional Leaders Podcast to hear the voices and stories from amazing changemakers and be inspired to make a real difference in the world.
You're listening to the Exceptional Podcast Network.